Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I Love You Tea with Trashellie, now sponsored by Yui Hirahara. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Elle.
And tonight we're going to be continuing our series where we're going to be digging in a little more to our I Love You characters. Last week we talked about Shin-ae and Noel, and we really got to dig in a lot more into kind of like what their motivations are, what's driving them, and, like what kinds of possible outcomes exist for them should they succeed or fail at their, main objectives. This week, we're going to be talking a little more about some of our side characters.
If you're reading I Love You and the recent chapter left you blue, or feeling like it's too good to be true, we get together and share our theory, bend down and praise the almighty Quimchi. Come join us for tea with Trashellie.
I know we don't get to talk about these characters a lot as much, or not on their own without being attached to the other characters. So I'm kind of looking forward to this one tonight. What about you, Elle?
I am. I've written a couple of essays on the side characters because, like you said, like a lot of the times we touch a little bit on them, but they're not our main focus. So sometimes their stories can get sidelined. Not to pun. Yeah. So I think it's a good chance to give them a bit of the digging into in depth that they deserve, because Kimchi has really thought through everyone in the story.
Right. Like, even though they're side characters, it doesn't mean that they lack any development. And we've been very fortunate, I think, that we've had good opportunities to start to dig into them a lot. And even for the ones who we haven't gotten to dig into a lot, at least she's given us enough information for us to start reading into them. And, we've had enough flashbacks to start to get a good grasp of kind of who they are and why they are the version of themselves that we've met at this point in the storyline. I think Dita is a really good example of that, where he kind of straddles that line where he's very much involved with the main cast, but he himself obviously has never been a main cast himself, unfortunately.
Poor Dieter. Hello,
I know. He cursed himself. But despite the fact that he isn't that main character who we've been able to get into his head, we still have gotten to know a lot about him. Unfortunately, like he's more prone to talking about himself than, say, Noel. So, Elle, why don't you start us on him?
Okay, so I think for Dieter, I think this is actually a really interesting point in time in the story to be talking about him, because I think that the Christmas arc and the hospital arc has been really, really pivotal for his character.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we meet Dieter, he's this kind of shy,
like a timid mouse.
Yeah, like a little timid mouse teddy bear boy. And he's pining for Shin-ae and everyone shoulder to cry on, and honestly quite bottled up in a way, where he's not bottled up in the same manner as Noel, but he's very life is going to happen to him and there's nothing that he can do about it, and none of this stuff is the end of the world, but he just has to move on. And then
it's a really interesting contrast to Shin-ae, because she's at that point where she doesn't want people to make choices and decisions for her. She doesn't want to keep accepting that life is just going to happen. Whereas, he spent his whole life being told, oh, we're going to move again, we're going to leave again, you have to say goodbye to everybody, this is going to happen. You're going through the motions, you're just accepting that this is just going to keep happening, and he's very resigned to the fact of it.
Resigned is, I feel like, a really good way to describe Dieter's emotional state. Like you said, he's the moving around really shaped a lot of who Dieter is, from my perspective. Where he he, in a very similar way to our other characters, was never able to make real bonds and connections and feel stable, but it wasn't because anything in his environment prevented him from doing that. It was because he could do it, but then, like you said, he's just going to pack up and leave again. There's not enough time, and he's not going to be able to maintain those connections, and it becomes a, like, if every time I start to feel open and connected and stable and belonging, I'm just going to lose it all and have to start over at the beginning. Like, I'm not going to put all of my effort into running this race just to be put back at zero after every lap,
Right. There's a kind of what's the point of it all feeling to it. Because, right, why are you expending all of that energy just to get hurt again? Like, in his very own way, he is protecting himself from being hurt over and over. In, much the same way that Shin-ae is also building her own walls in order to prevent herself from being hurt over and over. In very different ways, but that, ultimate goal is the same. They are still trying to prevent themselves from being hurt.
And even further, like, there's a bit of like Shin-ae's not wanting to be the burden in Dieter too, where part of the reason that all of this is bottled up is because that, like, his dad is in the military, his dad needs to move, and like, if Dieter is not going to be a burden, he has to come with them. He can't put up a fight. He doesn't want to show that it upsets him, because, like, how bad would that make his parents feel about the fact that they have to move, which they probably already feel bad about. So Dieter doesn't want to burden his family with, his reality that this is something that's difficult for him. This is something that upsets him. And he does feel like he is unable to really plant roots and make connections and maintain things.
And then, especially when you're a military child, there is a further layer to it, because, when one of your parents, or especially in his case, like both of your parents, when you've got a parent who's serving, there's kind of that feeling of, you're ungrateful if you are upset because your parent is out here, putting their life on the line for, blah 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 reason, for your liberty, for your security, for etc. Whatever they're saying. If his father is deployed, he's out overseas, he's away from his family, he might be living in uncomfortable conditions, doing this for his role in the military, for his role to protect and serve. And who are you to sit there and complain just because you get to sit here and live in a nice house and go and live in all of these different countries, etc., etc. And obviously that is a very unfair way to look at things, because, being ripped away from your life, never being able to establish those roots, is obviously going to be really upsetting. But, people can't help but develop that feeling sometimes, because it's like, wow, who am I to feel this way? How can I possibly, how can I possibly voice these feelings when my parent is going through so much worse, or something like that?
Right. And we see that so much in the way that he has developed this, like, idea that he just has to move on, and in the way that he has become the shoulder for everyone else, where, he hears out their problems. He lets some of these people be an unhealthy relationship for him, where he's always willing to hear them out, but he doesn't pay attention to his own needs. And it's a reflection of that dynamic, where it's that, like, he has these emotional issues from the hardships of moving around like this. But like you said, it's like that, who am I to feel like this and bring it up when, my parents have it worse and they're going through so much more and they're doing it for a cause. And, I just have to sit and cope and move on, and, it'll be fine, and it's not my place.
Right. And I think, again, that creates a really interesting parallel with him and Shin-ae and Noel, and just how I think part of what bonds all of them together is in some subconscious way, they are all acting on that unmet need. But on the conscious level, they're all doing it for each other, not so much for themselves. And it's really interesting to see kind of how they dance around that without, quite directly addressing it until more recently. Just how, like, oh, I have needs, but this person clearly has it worse, so I'm not going to talk about it. Like how, I don't know, it's just something really interesting to me. And it's the way that people who are so similar to each other obviously get drawn to each other without quite realizing it. Again, that's something on this very subconscious level that, made them all appeal to each other, even though they don't quite understand why or how it's happening. And, it's very much because they are all acting on that unmet need. They want to create that sense of stability and that bond, but on that conscious level, they don't really know how to go about it. Or rather, on that conscious level, they're creating that birth of distance to try to protect themselves and try to, create that padding and make themselves feel like they're safe from what they believe or know is inevitable, that at some point in time, this is going to shift courses and they're going to get hurt.
And it's like we've kind of talked about with Shin-ae and Noel specifically applies here, where like they feel each other and see each other in that distance that they're creating. Like you said, because they're all doing it because they all carry that fear around relationships and that fear of being the burden and opening up, and that like kind of constant like ticking clock of when is this going to run out. With Shin-ae, it's like when am I going to be turned on and betrayed and abandoned. With Noel, it's like when am I going to bring this like hurt storm raining down enough that this is a problem and I have to leave. And for Dieter, it's like when is it going to be time to move on.
And I think something else that we can probably glean from him is that even though he isn't voicing it, he probably shares a similar sentiment to Shin-ae in that maybe he feels like he's never really been important enough to people. Because that's the other thing about leaving, is that it's not just that he and his friends are always leaving each other and moving away. It's also that they all lose touch with each other over time, right? You move on and you form new friendships and you go to new places and you just kind of forget about those other people that you used to be friends with. And while I don't think it's quite in the same way that, Shin-ae has felt thrown away and, like literally felt thrown away, for Dita, I think it's more like you start to develop that sense of, I probably meant something to these people at this point in time, but it wasn't like a very lasting impression, right? Because I think we see that a lot as he starts to compare himself to the other people in Shin-ae's life, as he starts to develop these very real, very strong feelings for her. We see him comparing himself and measuring up to the people in her life, how he compares to Min-Hyuk, how he compares to Kosuke, how he compares to Noel. And, like that feeling of how he wants to be somebody who matters to her. He wants to be an impression in her life, not just, this passing breeze, but he wants to be somebody who matters. And I think that's like such a conflict with his feelings about how you have to accept that things are just going to happen, things are going to change, where, this is probably one of the first times that he wants to actually change that, where he wants to act on the very thing that he's telling himself, no, you're not, you shouldn't do that. That's how you get hurt.
And I think that's, again, like a recurring theme in our characters where, they often are wanting something that they feel like they can't have in the universe, or that, they can't have safely. Like you said, it's just going to bring them hurt. But when they get to that point where the desire to want to be allowed to have it starts to outweigh the fear of what might happen, is when we start getting these developments. Like I said, in the Christmas arc, we really start to see some turning around for Dieter, where like a lot of this arc is about him being able to start expressing his own needs in these relationships and like developing a confidence in who he is and what he brings to the table and the balance that he needs in these relationships. And I think that comes out of the like we're seeing Dieter get to that point where his wants and his fears are starting to shift on that pendulum, on that scale, and like tip in favor of one over the other.
Yeah. I think too I've kind of felt that up until this point Dita was lying to himself a lot. And I think like this is the point where he's finally, you know, facing the truth and being honest with himself. Because it's very easy to delude yourself and keep telling yourself, like this can change, which again is, like very much the opposite of what he's been telling himself all along is that, things aren't going to change. You have to accept it. And it's not that he's saying that nothing can change. It's that he's telling himself, you have to look at the situation for what it is. And the situation is that, he can see with his own eyes that Shin-ae does like somebody, but that somebody is not him, and that, yes, he has to be honest with himself and he does have to put his own feelings first for once. Because that's part of that issue with going with the flow and putting others ahead of yourself is that even though he feels like he's protecting himself by just kind of going with things, he's not affording himself protection when he doesn't draw those lines and draw those boundaries. When he was entertaining his hope, when he was playing with the idea of possibility, to be clear, I don't think there was anything wrong with that. I think that was a very important part of his development, was that he needed to put that foot forward and to actually make that attempt, especially as somebody who has clearly been very go with the flow, just accept things, acknowledge that things are going to happen and then you're going to leave and then it's going to happen all over again. For him to take that first step and to try and make that effort was such a big thing. And just watching how he makes the actual efforts to try to appeal to her in different ways. And not like in a, like trying to force her to like him kind of way, not in a trying to change himself for her way, but more of a trying to be a more confident version of himself, trying to open up more, trying to be the kind of person who isn't so in his own shell, And go on.
I was gonna say he's letting himself be seen pretty much for the first time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because he's not really changing himself in that, he's not adopting a whole new personality. He's not trying to be Youngie. He's just trying, something that I was thinking about is like how throughout a lot of I Love You, whenever we see Dita in his coat, he has it like fully zipped up. And then more recently, whenever we see him, he has it unzipped. And I can't remember if like Kimchi has ever talked about that or not, but it was like one of those little details that felt very subtle, but very, pointed, kind of like this is Dita coming out of his shell. This is him exposing himself, I don't want to say like being like a dog and showing his belly, but kind of, I like that idea of like how he's just kind of coming out of his shell and being more of himself, showing more of himself. And go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say we've seen a very similar like kind of symbolism with the clothing, like first like with Rand's jackets and his vests, and like with Noel's like inverse, where like the really extroverted Youngie persona faded away through the clothing.
Right, so like he literally went from the red coat to the gray coat, and I think Dita's coat kind of follows a very similar trajectory of time if I remember right. I haven't looked at it in a while, but around the same time, you can kind of start to notice the differences in his coat.
It's a really good observation. I think especially considering that when Noel bleeds out, like, despite the fact that it's snowing, Dieter's coat is, if I remember correctly, like fully open and his shirt is covered in blood.
Yeah. I remember that. Gosh. But yeah, I think that's such a really important step for Dita, because, you know, like, not to like be very cliche, but like the line that it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, like, rings really true for a character like him, because you learn a lot about yourself when you put yourself out there and you make an effort. You know, even if Shin-ae, you know, even though Shin-ae doesn't even fully return those feelings, he still tried. You know, you have no regrets. Like, maybe he regrets that he tried and it didn't work out, but wouldn't that, or what I'm trying to say, wouldn't you regret more never trying and never even knowing, you know? Because they still had that really cute amusement park date, you know? And I still stand by my feelings that if, you know, it wasn't for Noel being Noel, like, Shin-ae and Dita probably could have been a really cute couple. It's just, he was late. But again, like, for Dita, it's the kind of thing that's going to help him in his future development. Like, I know a lot of people who shipped Dita and Shin-ae feel really sad for him, but to me, it's like, this is such good growth development for him, because this is what's kind of getting him to see you have to put yourself first, and that's not a selfish act. Like, you have to take care of yourself. That's what Shin-ae's doing. That's what Noel's doing. You know, like, the people who put everyone ahead of themselves are the ones who wind up getting hurt the most.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my 20s watching my friends write Facebook statuses about, you know, like, how it's always people like them who put everyone ahead of them who always get hurt. And I'm like, that's why you're getting hurt. It's because you put everyone ahead of yourself. You've got to take care of yourself. Because the thing, you know, what we talk about on this podcast all the time is we live in our own heads. We don't always see when other people are hurting. We can't always be there and take care of each other the way that we want to. And if you're not opening up about your feelings, how is anybody going to know that you're going through things, you know? Like, we as readers know that Dita is in pain every time, you know, Shin-ae goes to him to cry about Noel. Like, you know, like, we know. Shin-ae, she's, you know, our girl is a little dense. She's not thinking about these things. But we know. And you know, like, how can you expect somebody to know something that you haven't vocalized? We don't read minds. We aren't cats. We can't smell your emotion shifts or anything like that. So for Dita to have that awakening and realize, I have to draw these lines. I have to, you know, like, create this distance. That's so big. And I, you know, like, I still stand by what I've said before, that I think this is actually going to really improve his future friendship with Shin-ae and Noel. That, you know, obviously he's got to, you know, like, deal with his feelings, nurse his wounds, but I think in the future it's going to help them develop, like, an actual good, healthy relationship. Because that's the other thing with Shin-ae too, is, like, she doesn't realize she's hurting him. We know she doesn't intend to hurt him. We know she doesn't want to hurt him. But she can't know she's hurting him if he doesn't tell her.
Yeah, and with the three of them, I feel like we have this really interesting, like, set of relationships where, with Dieter and Shin-ae, you know, because of his feelings for her, he has been letting her do all of this taking and has been shoving his own emotions away in that kind of, like, not necessarily wholly that hope that she'll like him back, because, I mean, a part of him has known that that's not, like, even though there's a part of him entertaining that, another part of him knows that that's not where it's going, but just that, like, he wants so much to be a person who is close to her and supports her. And like you
Right.
said, it hurts him. It hurts him every time that he does it. And he knows that it's hurting him, but she doesn't. And, you know, in that relationship, it's Shin-ae bearing her whole self, and Dieter's the one bottling himself up and supporting her. And, like...
And because she's the one bearing her whole self and he's not, it creates it creates that uneven dynamic, but she doesn't realize that it's uneven. You know, like, she thinks that Dita, you know, like, the whole sum of him is everything that she knows. You know, she thinks that he's just like, oh, stoic Dita, you know, I guess not completely stoic because, you know, the fainting, but, you know, like, she thinks that, like, you know, the way that he was so busy tending to her needs after they found out about Noel and, you know, the whole reality of who he really is. You know, like, in the same way that fandom saw Soushi go to play video games, they're like, oh, he clearly doesn't care about Noel. You know, Shin-ae sees Dita taking care of her and being completely collected about this. And, you know, she's like, why am I the only one breaking down? Don't you care? And, you know, it's because when she's the only one bearing herself and he's not, she thinks this is who he is. This is what he's showing, so this must be everything. But it's not. There's so much more to him.
And then, like, on that same note, on the flip side, when we look at Dieter and Noel's relationship, you know, Dieter is the one who's been, you know, putting his foot forward, albeit in that, like, reserved way. And, you know, Noel is the one who's hiding from him and who's being, you know, the support all the time and never taking anything. And we see how much it hurts Dieter when it comes out that, you know, Noel wasn't trying to have a genuine relationship. He wasn't being genuine. He didn't let himself lean on them. And, you know, all those times that Dieter thought that, you know, Noel was fine and everything that Noel said was honest, you know, it wasn't really true. And in that relationship, he is in more of Shin-ae's role, even though it's not totally the same, because again, like, Dieter is still ultimately being reserved in a way that Shin-ae is not, and, you know, there's no romantic feelings that kind of push that dynamic even further. But, you know, Dieter has, you know, made this friend. It seems like his first longtime friend that he thought he might be able to hold on to and keep, and that was this really genuine relationship. And then he finds out that, you know, he's been doing all of the taking and Noel's been doing all of the giving, not even from a place of what Dieter perceives as his authentic self. And I had an end to that sentence. What did I just say?
No, I get what you're saying. There's that line where after it's in one of Shin-ae's memories of what happened after they, Rand left with Noel's body to go to the hospital. That came out more morbid than I meant. And, you know, Dita has that line about, like, some friends we are, because, like, you know, we never noticed any of this.
Yes. That's where I was going, where, like, you know, he is the one who didn't know any of what was going on with Nolan, who was taking without even realizing it. Whereas in the flip relationship with Shin-ae, you know, Dieter's the one doing all of the giving and Shin-ae is the one having no idea. And we can see through both of these relationships that either extreme is unbalanced, you know, and it's going to get both of you hurt, where one person is giving so much and not being supported and having that emotional turmoil, and the other person is hurting someone that they care about, that they want to have a bond with without even realizing it. And in the end, neither of you have that, you know, genuine, authentic, strong bond because of the fact that it's not balanced.
Right. Because the thing about that line is, like, while fandom on a whole, I think, took it as, like, yes, good, finally Dita and Soushi are noticing that there's so many things that they haven't noticed. It is simultaneously, there's so much I haven't noticed, but also there is so much that Noel never told us about. There is so much about him that he never opened up about. Like you said, it goes both ways. It's the fact that, you know, this friendship is not as authentic as I ever thought it was, and I want it to be authentic. And yeah, I think as much as Dita is going through this experience and being painfully hurt at every turn over and over, it is so important for him and so integral, I guess, for him to develop into who I think we're going to see him in the future as. I know he's not going to go through an extreme change, but as the person who's been kind of the mediator of the group, I think as he works on his confidence and his assertion, as he works on learning to advocate for himself without feeling guilty and without, feeling like it's selfish, I think, we're probably going to see something like that for him in the future. I see some conversation about that going on in the chat right now. I think Hi was saying that I think Dita could be a catalyst in a way. Like his book of notes he has in the recent chapters, he's trying to understand and be let into their problems. I could see him becoming more assertive and opening communication with his friends. And I really think that's probably where he's going to go, is just learning how important it is to have those two-way streets and, actually facilitate that. Actually be like, if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be a give and take. It can't be that, you're here and all you're doing is helping us and you're never giving any of you to us, And obviously, as we've said before, I think the birthday party has shown that they'll probably work their way to that in the future. I know right now it feels like there's some setbacks, but I still feel like the poignance of that scene is telling us that those relationships are going to, stay defined, and that in our time skip, we're going to continue to see those explored.
Yeah, and like in this arc, we're already starting to see it with that, he's pulling back a bit from Shin-ae and he's pushing towards Noel a bit, and he is starting to bare his heart in that like healthy, authentic way. And like I do really agree with, I think that he's going to start going down that path of, opening these dialogues and being able to bring out this kind of more confident side of himself, while also, like you talked about way earlier on, like that concept of you have to, fight for certain things and put your foot forward, but you also have to be aware of the reality of the situation and what it really is. Where like right now, not right now, but in the past, he has been very much operating on an unbalanced scale of, where does he have to push and, really go for it, and where doesn't he? And like, what is the reality? Where I think now he's looking at things a bit clearer and taking a bit less of that like kind of like blind security or resignation, where he as someone was just saying in the chat, like it's not his job to know what someone else is going through when they don't tell him things, which very much goes two ways. And I think he's going to get into that understanding of like, he can't change people, he can't push people, he can't change the world, but based on what the situation is, there are times where he can put his, he can reach his hand out or pull his hand back, and when those times are going to be for him to be able to strike those balances.
Right. I feel like the entirety of this Christmas party arc has been that opening for Dita to kind of learn what is important to him and what matters. Mm-hmm. Since it like you said, kind of how we see him withdrawing from Shin-ae a little and moving towards Noel, in that sense that he doesn't want to lose his friend just because of a girl, not to minimize Shin-ae or anything like that, but like he does not want to lose this friendship because they both like the same person. He knows that like it's not going to destroy him to see them eventually get together if it goes that route. Is it going to hurt him at this time? Yeah, but like clearly that's not happening yet. Like I think that was something that was really, really wonderful about that that episode where he goes to talk to Noel and he very directly addresses their feelings, because it needed to happen, and we know that part of why Noel is withdrawing from Shin-ae is because he doesn't want to hurt Dita, and Dita wants it to be clear that he doesn't want to stop people from acting on their feelings just because he also happens to like this person. Like he's starting to pick and choose his battles, and it's like there's no reason to continue to chase somebody who he knows doesn't return his feelings. And that's not a self-deprecating, thought or feeling. It's a very, pragmatic way to look at something. Shin-ae is somebody that he still appreciates as a friend. He's somebody that she's somebody that he probably still wants to maintain that connection with, but he also absolutely does not want to lose Noel's friendship as a result of it, So yeah, I think it's forcing him to really sit here and reassess, what does he want? What matters to him? Obviously, like a high school crush, that's something that you can get over. Like I don't want to belittle his feelings or anything, but I think it also speaks really highly of his feelings towards Noel and their friendship and how much he wants to, cling to that friendship and really make it an authentic friendship where he wants to sit here and have this open and clear communication with him. For Dita, like you said, Noel is probably that first real friendship that he's like, this could be an actual enduring friendship. This is something that might actually, last. Especially because they're in their last year of school. They're going to be off to college, but they're at that point where it is so much easier to hang on to your friendships now than say, middle school. Dita is sitting here reassessing his values and going, you know what? I want to fight for this friendship, and where Shin-ae is concerned, I want to preserve that friendship.
Yeah. And I like what was just with the parallel between Noel with Dieter and Soushi and Shin-ae with Maya and Rika, where it's a group of friends who want to be genuine friends, but there's secrets and inauthentic aspects to it that prevents them from being open. And how do they move forward with that?
Oh my god, I've never seen that parallel before. I love that. I'm digesting, I'm sorry. No, that's a really good one.
That might make it a good talk about Soushi.
Yeah, that's a nice little segue. Because I really love Soushi. I feel like if it's become obvious yet, and I think it has, I like the characters that come across as, how do I want to say it? I guess problematic is the word, even though I don't like that word. The characters that, fandom sometimes kind of side eyes and they're like, oh, this character, blah, blah, blah. Soushi's gotten a lot of flack, especially as it became more and more obvious that he was being paid by Kosuke to keep an eye on Noel. A lot of people really didn't like that, especially because Noel and Kosuke have such a bad relationship that, obviously it didn't sit right with a lot of people for Soushi to be spying on his friend to, Noel's abuser. I fully understand that. When I first read that theory and I started to, go back and reread things and look at it, I remember my gut instinct being, I bet either Noel already knows about it, or that it was pretty clear that Soushi wasn't taking it super seriously, right? When we see them in the little arc where they all go to the movies together, and Soushi's like, oh yeah, oh by the way, Noel said something about going to Shin-ae's party or something like that, whatever. Anyway, blah blah blah. You could tell he wasn't really he's not exactly excited to be Noel's watchdog, right? Or like when they were all out for ramen, and Kosuke was calling Soushi to ask if he knew where Noel was, and how like Soushi was really discreet about it, and he's like, I'm just gonna like go take this call, just ignore me. And like there, it was always kind of obvious to me that like I don't think Soushi was like really proud of it or really wanted to be doing it. And yeah, I don't know. I like Soushi a lot, and as we got that flashback that like really showed his past and how his friendship with Noel first happened, and the fact that he absolutely did not want that friendship in the first place, just really made me love him even more. I don't know. He's a character I'm very endeared to. I love the loudmouth characters a lot. The character who like brings you comic relief, but then you find out that they have like that secret soft spot, like their little weakness. Those always get to me.
And I feel like we got a lot of like really interesting kind of like, I don't know what to call it, but like things to look at, I guess, through Soushi, where like I think the way that his relationship with Noel developed is really, really interesting. Because like you said, he didn't want this friendship at all. Even when Noel was trying to help Soushi with the bullies and like save him, Soushi was still like, get out. And he only signs up for it because not even just because Kosuke offers him, getting rid of the bullies and money for his family, both things that he very much needs. It's only after Kosuke like gives him it and then takes it away that Soushi gives in. Where like before that, like he had so much conviction that he didn't want to be around this kid that he was like, no, like take your offer and leave. But then when they start hang out, it creates this dynamic where it's not supposed to be authentic or genuine from either of them. Like people harp on the Soushi aspect of it a lot, but Noel, like everyone, Noel didn't befriend Soushi with honest intentions either. And so you have these two people who theoretically should be keeping each other at a distance and are both using each other for some sort of personal gain, where Soushi needs to report back to Kosuke in order to support his family and keep himself safe. And Noel is using Soushi for that absolution to try and correct his karmic wrongs and the blight of his existence in the universe. And then throughout this time that they essentially are forced to spend together and like play nice, they both develop this really genuine relationship and this really genuine bond. And you can, like, obviously we didn't see it in real time, but you can feel the guilt on both sides start to build up as they realize that they have created this very genuine bond based off of ingenuine premises. And it's like, once you're so far in, what do you do about that? How do you, again, like that, like, how do you move forward when there's, this, like, these looming secrets underneath you that are in the foundation of your relationship? And we can see that for Noel, it was kind of unintentional, where he just started, being, like, feeling more like a friend without wanting to. And for Soushi, we see that, like you said, he stopped taking his job as seriously. Like, he, really from what it seems like to me, he really struck a balance of how much information do I need to give Kosuke to keep Kosuke off our backs, including Noel, and, how little can I give him so that it doesn't meaningfully disrupt Noel's life. Where, like, he tried to create this balance where they're both kind of benefiting from Soushi spying for Kosuke, even though the guilt of the fact that, there is that underlying, false foundation was still eating away.
I love this about Soushi and Noel so much. Like, to me, that was the best reveal because, like you said, it is both of them. Like, where with Dita and Noel, and even Noel and Shin-ae, it was a very unbalanced thing. The fact that both of them had these dishonest intentions with their friendship, and still managed to become these close friends means so much to me, because like I feel like it has to be reiterated that when Shin-ae overheard Noel talking to Lil Buddy, he specifically named Shin-ae, Dita, and Soushi. And you know, like it speaks volumes about the fact that Soushi does mean something to Noel, and that clearly Noel means something to Soushi. The fact that Soushi was so worried that if he comes clean about Kosuke now, at this point, it will be the ammunition that Noel is looking for, you know, to give him the reason to actually leave, to cut them off, and to actually go away. And he doesn't want that. And it goes back to that contrast with how fandom saw Soushi's reaction to, you know, finding out about Noel and that he wasn't who he said he was, and they're like, oh, he's just gonna go play video games? He doesn't have any feelings. He doesn't care. And, you know, clearly he does care. But Soushi, you know, like, everybody expresses feelings in very different ways, you know, like, there are some people like us who actively cry on the podcast and then, you know, don't want people to perceive it. There are some people... There are some people who they have to process their emotions in their own way. Some, you know, for Soushi, who first off, we know already knew that Noel was related to the Hiroharas, you know, there were things that he already knew. So he was fending off not only the fact that this came out as a bombshell to people, but that he knew. So he also has a layer of guilt. So, you know, for him, to shut down your emotions and go and play video games does not imply that you don't care. It's just that this is how he copes. Everyone copes. Dita was like ignoring his own feelings and focusing on Shin-ae, but nobody was, you know, like calling him out about it, you know? I've got strong, passionate feelings about Kosuke, about Soushi, and the fact that, you know, he's just been looked down upon a lot, and it makes me feel sad because he's a good character, and he also clearly knows a lot more than people have let on.
And I want to get into that in a minute, but I also want to say, like, kind of continuing on that, Soushi's reaction to finding out everything about Noel. Like we were talking about earlier, considering the fact that relationship was built dishonestly on both sides, and so she knew this entire time that, you know, he has been playing a role in their friendship as well, and that he already feels guilty about that, you know, did he even feel allowed to feel hurt about it? You know, going off and playing the video games could very possibly be a way for him to shut down the hurt that he felt, because who is he to be upset about the fact that Noel was lying to them and is going to cut them all off when Soushi himself has been a dishonest friend?
Right. Like, it's such a complex web. And, like, obviously this is something that readers didn't yet know, so we can't fault people for not understanding that at the time. But in retrospect, looking back at it, it's such a layered scene. And it just, I don't know, it gives me so much respect for Kosuke. Why do I keep saying Kosuke? Oh my gosh. It gives me so much respect for Soushi. And again, it just goes back to, like, how significant it is that this friendship was born out of the fact that neither one of them wanted it. Neither one of them really, you know, like, Noel's just doing this because he just wants to, you know, help somebody. He just wants to, you know, his absolution. And it's the way that it becomes real. I like that scene where Noel has, you know, he's in school and all the kids are talking around him and he knows that they don't really like him, but they always invite him to the movies anyway because, you know, they think he's gonna, like, go shoot up the school or something. And they want to make sure that if he ever, you know, loses it, they're going to be safe. And then when he gets out of school, there's Soushi who's waiting for him because he's like, hey, you want to go to the arcade? And it's that juxtaposition of all of these people who don't really care about Noel, who don't even really know him, who, like are just putting up pretenses, who are very fake around him. And then he gets outside and there's somebody who is like an actual friend. And like as we start to peel away those layers and find out how this friendship formed and how like so much of it wasn't even real at first, but that is real. I love it. Like, I love it. I love them.
And like Casey just said, like with Soushi, he knew that he might get hurt in this process of watching over Noel, but he enjoyed Noel's company and wanted to be his friend regardless. And I was gonna say, like, in that, that time around 150 and 151 where Noel is planning to leave them, in the same way that like Noel going to jail and like having his identity revealed, it was like the out for him to leave these friendships that he was intending to leave and felt guilty about the place that they were at, and he cared enough genuinely about them that he ended up not being able to resist them when they came back around. Like Noel revealing himself and cutting them all off was Soshi's out from Kosuke and from this spying situation. And like it's no longer Patreon stream information, it's just fast pass. I was like, can I legally say this? But where Soshi is talking about, it went on for so long, and, how was he supposed to stop? How do you even stop when something's been going that long? What was he supposed to do? Where, like, Noel essentially gave him the out, but Soshi still came back. He went to Noel's school with them and tried to find them. He went to Noel's house with Dieter. He went to that birthday party where he cared enough about Noel to essentially throw away that chance to get away from the thing that has been bringing him so much guilt and is still eating him alive, to continue being Noel's friend, which is very much a reflection of what Noel has done, where he tried to throw them all away and then in the end wasn't able to, and wants to maintain those bonds no matter how difficult it is.
So she consciously chose Noel.
Yes.
And like, so I think we can actually say this because the episode is out, but like Kimchi gave us a spoiler of the birthday party episode. It was one of her little teasers that she gave patrons. And I remember when she did that, like I sobbed because it was like the music combined with them just made me bawl. And a significant portion of it was the fact that, yes, Soushi was there. Because something that really weighed heavily on my mind was the fact that throughout that whole party, Soushi wasn't present. He wasn't there watching the altercation between Kosuke and Noel. He wasn't there, like thinking about the fact that Soushi is downstairs hanging out with Rika, and then suddenly here comes Noel falling from, the second floor into from the chandelier and the glass table. Like this is how you see your friend for the first time since you saw him on the news. And like how harrowing is that? And then like he leaves, and then like you guys all go outside and like little buddy's leading you off, and the next time you see him he's just like bleeding out in the snow. And like, I know I told you guys I wasn't gonna cry tonight, but like I'm like trying not to work up to it, but we're kind of working up to it, so shh. And like I just keep thinking about how awful that must have been for Soushi, who already carries all of this guilt, who already is so afraid of losing him. And like the possibility that like if they had been late, like like it kills me. So for Soushi to be there at the birthday party, like like, oh god, what was the line? Like I can't remember what he said, but just like I still feel like it is. You guys,
the chat is currently calling out the amount of crying. People are screaming "Trashellie, no!" and like we abbreviate this podcast to capital T, lowercase w, capital T. But Solidarity pointed out, looks like a crying face, and like everyone's calling out.
really didn't think Soushi was gonna make me cry, but here we are.
We cannot fight who we are.
Like, it gets to me, and just, like, thinking about how important it was for Soushi to be there. Like, the fact that, like, it goes back to saying, like, the fact that Soushi consciously chose Noel, the fact that, he also bore Noel's blood. He was there helping. He was there doing shifts with Dita. He's been a part of this. He chose Noel. And just like I know Elle and I have talked about this a lot, how I've always felt that Noel probably had his own suspicions that Soushi probably reports to Kosuke on some level. Maybe he doesn't know how much he does, but Noel is a very perceptive person. If Dita noticed that Kosuke stopped hanging around when Soushi came around, Noel probably put 2 and 2 together. Clearly, Dita thought it was because that Soushi's a lot, and who's Kosuke isn't going to want to hang around that. But I think Noel probably put 2 and 2 together. And I still feel like that moment where Soushi kind of pops his head in and he's like, "Hey, long time no see, buddy." Like I still feel like maybe that was a moment where it's kind of like this quiet understanding, perhaps not entirely a whole like I forgive you kind of thing, but at the very least an understanding that like and maybe we'll find out that we were wrong and that he'll be mad about it because like he's kind of going through his feelings regarding Kosuke right now, but I feel like he's got his suspicions, and the fact that Soushi was there through all of that, the fact that Soushi pulled those shifts, the fact that the fact that, like you said, Elle, he gave him the out, and Soushi still came back. I think that says a lot about their relationship and how Noel feels about him.
Yeah, and like we briefly mentioned earlier, like Soushi is a lot more perceptive of a character than people give him credit for, and I think both Noel and Soushi are a lot more perceptive of each other and their relationship than what we're like. I do very much think that even if Noel isn't 100% like, I think Soushi's spying for Kosuke, like he knows that there's some sort of relationship there and that there is a correlation between Kosuke disappearing and Soushi appearing. And, he can sense some of those deeper things going on in Soushi, even if the two of them aren't directly acknowledging it. And on the flip side, Soushi can see some of those deeper things in him. He's the only one who had really any perspective on Noel's kind of double life situation, Noel's family life, what his actual world is like, as well as like Noel's emotions. Like we see early on in that arcade, he's picking up on what's happening between Noel and Shin-ae, and he's like always kind of trying to guide Noel a little bit to make less trouble for himself.
Even before Dita had picked up on it, Soushi was like picking up on it, and that was I remember when I like found that, and I remember pointing it out to you and Bami and being like, "Yo," because like Soushi is just like it's one of those things where the characters who tend to be like your class clown types are the ones who often we don't pay attention to them when they're being quiet, and it's just Soushi just standing there kind of like watching Noel and Shin-ae, but it was the look on his face, the way that he's very much kind of like scrutinizing them, like something's happening here. Yeah, he really was. Because like something that always stood out to me was like the most clear one is obviously when Dita and Soushi are calling Shin-ae about the tutoring, and Dita's like, "Oh, let's call Noel. We can have him join." And Soushi's like, "No, don't." And then he like makes up an excuse about why. And like that Soushi's like, "Oh no, we shouldn't involve him." But you're like, "Wait, why?" And then like there's all the theories like, "Oh, because Soushi used to like Alyssa and Noel stole her from him," or something like that. And like when you go back and reread and you realize just how early So she was picking up on like that chemistry, because that's clearly what it is. It's the way that they just gravitate towards each other. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that it was all four of them playing, what was it, Fabio Kart?
Yeah.
All four of them are playing, but Noel and Shin-ae are just like right in their own little world, so wrapped up in, bickering with each other. They haven't even noticed that Soushi and Dita have gotten off and aren't even playing anymore. And like, yeah, like you said, so she's just kind of giving them the side eye, like, yo. And yeah, like, even though Dita is the character that we are told is observant, Soushi picks up on things. He sees things, and I don't think we as readers gave him enough credit for what he notices and what he sees. And like you said, like, definitely, like, kind of trying to steer him away. And I don't think it was so much because, like, so she thinks that Noel is kind of friend who, steals people's girls, as much as, like you said, trying to kind of keep him out of trouble, trying to keep, things from blowing up.
Mm-hmm. And, like, we're both Soushi and Dieter under that really like meta obvious observe sign. Was that both of them? Like, I know Dieter was in the forefront, but I think Soushi was in the frame too. But anyway, whether or not that's correct, I think an interesting contrast between Dieter and Soushi is that both of them are very observant and perspective characters, truly, but Dieter's kind of flaw can be that sometimes he trusts his observational perception a little too much, and he gets, the wrong read or an incomplete read because he thinks that he has it all figured out. Whereas Soushi doesn't trust his perception enough, it seems, where like he picked up on these things. He saw them. He saw these sides of Noel as well. But he kind of lets it go because I think he doesn't think that he has the perceptive ability that he does, in the same way that the readers let it go because, it's not hitting them over the head that like he is capable of picking up on these things. We can trust his judgment.
And it's also kind of like, what can he really do about it anyway, Like you said, he can try and steer Noel, but ultimately Noel is a big boy, Like he can't force him to stay out of trouble. If he's going to make a big mess, that's his own doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Hi said that. I kind of feel like side characters also feel overlooked sometimes, or they themselves feel overlooked. I feel with some of the side characters, they're existing in the background with their own observations and feelings. And I think that's really true. And I think, Dita has gotten away with a lot of things because even, like I said, even though he's a side character, he very much straddles that sort of, that main character line where, like he's not a main character, but he's with them enough that we pick up on his interactions. Whereas, someone like Soushi, especially because he's treated so much like the class clown, a lot of what he says and does gets treated as comical value. So, when he's sitting here side-eyeing Noel, it's kind of like the kind of thing that you just don't pay attention to because there's other things happening. And that's the other thing is, I know there's a lot to be said about Kimchi's framing and how she does her scenes and things that are happening on the peripheral versus, what is in the main focus. The little things that you might not pay a lot of attention to because it's not part of the main action of that frame. Obviously, we too are drawn to the fact that Noel and Shin-ae are still bickering, even as Dita and Soushi have gotten off of the games. As, Dita is trying to get their attention. Most people aren't paying attention to Soushi because he's just kind of, there. He's not saying anything. So, I like how she slips in little details like that. Because, right, it is so easy to overlook those kinds of things. But, characters like Dita, Soushi, Maya, they do observe a lot. And even if they aren't saying things, Kimchi shows us what she wants us to pick up on through the characters. Like, they are the lens through which she wants us to see things. Even if something is framed a certain way, and like we think that the frame is the lens, I think the character and the way that they're observing something is very often the actual lens. Like, that is the view frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dita is the most in the center of the side characters. I think followed up by, I think Maya and Min-Hyuk are tied. I don't think I would say either one of them come ahead of each other, just because Maya is more present, simply just because she's actually, like, here. But Min-Hyuk obviously is closer to her, and we can't discount, like, his level of importance in that way. And coincidentally, they're next. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like when Min-Hyuk is in the story, he very easily overtakes Maya, but I feel like overall, they're tied because, like what you said, Maya is just present more often, but like she gets less time per appearance, but more appearances, whereas Min-Hyuk gets more focus whenever he's on screen, but he's physically here less.
Right. And Maya and Min-Hyuk, I think, remain really intertwined because Maya reveals things that Min-Hyuk can't reveal. Like, she reveals the things that Min-Hyuk can't know or can't see, again, because of, like, his presence and stuff like that. I feel like they are just, like, intertwined. It's really hard for me to separate them in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, that is a great transition to our next character / pair, the Park siblings, Min-Hyuk and Maya.
We'll go ahead and start.
It's so hard to find a starting point because we're like, they're so connected.
Right? Like, my gut says Min-Hyuk, but part of me says Maya, because I just said that Maya reveals things that Min-Hyuk doesn't. What do you guys think? I'm gonna ask you guys, who do you want to hear about first? Because I know either way we can swing it to, like, play right into them. Okay. They want Maya. Okay, I can do this. I can work with this. Because Maya is very much like Soushi, wherein I love her so much. And I absolutely love her in spite of how fandom felt about her at the time. Because I think Maya is very much like my girl. In that she's very much like such a real character to me, in a very similar way to Alyssa, in that all of her flaws are so human to me, I love all of her insecurities, which sounds awful to say out loud, but I love that she has that pettiness to her. I love that she can be a little, like, bitchy about her feelings, because, I get it. Sometimes you don't know how to express your feelings in a meaningful way, so you are awful about it, and that's okay. It's not okay.
Okay.
But, I think I like her a lot, because Maya is... What am I trying to say? Let me think. I like Maya a lot just because she's clearly a good person who has a lot of resentment about how she got stuffed into a role that she never really asked for. And, she's playing her role because she wants to be that good person, because she wants to make people happy. But she wasn't really given the choice, and she resents that. And she doesn't know how to connect to Shin-ae. And they've got those feelings built up between them, again, that resentment, because Min-Hyuk has left and is bad enough. Like, it's not just that Min-Hyuk left, it's the fact that Min-Hyuk befriended, this other person, and now, in a way, it feels like Shin-ae came in between her and her brother, and, it changed the dynamic, and she never really got to have a healthy way to learn how to deal with that at first, before it was like, oh, hey, you guys are the same age, you guys should be friends. And there was never really a, do you want to be friends? It's, it was like pushed on her. And a lot of it wasn't very fair to her.
And like Maya has expressed that she has this feeling where it's very much that fallacy of like whose problems are worse, where she's like
Mm-hmm.
she's hurting and she's already struggling to express it and struggling to like feel okay having those hurts, feel like they're valid pains to have and like valid conflicts for her to work out. But then, the kind of source and target of so much of her resentment is this girl who has just been through her back, like, is like kind of a nightmare, and who isn't a bad person. I talked about this again with like Shin-ae and Alyssa, where you start to internalize the result of that hurt because you know that this person who is the root of the hurt you're feeling isn't a bad person, and if they're not bad, then where do you put the blame? And it starts to go to yourself, and it bred that resentment for Maya, but she felt like she wasn't allowed to have those feelings and therefore wasn't allowed to confront them because technically she had it better. Where like in a similar vein as Dieter with like the moving, it's like who am I to complain about and bring up these problems when the other person in the scenario has it so much worse. And like everyone is just like you said, and like everyone in the chat is saying, like she's just so very real. Like she's just being a real teenage girl with her real feelings and these feelings that are so valid in these roles that she was funneled into and things that she thinks she needs to do or be without really any ability to be accepted or acknowledged or validated in the way that she should be.
And nobody really gives her the opportunity to talk about it. And like to Min-Hyuk's defense, it's not that he didn't give her the opportunity. It's just it was one of those cases of because she didn't bring it up, he didn't know. Mm-hmm. But I do have feelings about Mrs. Park in the fact that she definitely did funnel them into roles, and I feel like it definitely put Maya in a corner where she felt like she couldn't talk about things. Or if she did, when she did try and bring things up, like Mina didn't always hear her out, she didn't always listen to her. And that just tells a child that there's no point in trying. You're just going to get shut down. So she just is made to contain these feelings and hold things in. And that's not healthy. That's not good. And like you said, you get that feeling that your problems are so minuscule compared to somebody else's. How can you possibly feel like it's okay for you to talk about yours? That just makes you look so petty. And she didn't deserve that. And I think that's why it was so important for her and Shin-ae to have that blow up, because I think that was the only way she was ever going to get those feelings out, was that Shin-ae had to literally poke and prod her for her to explode and finally let it out. And go on.
I was going to say she was trying so hard to keep it in because, like we said, she didn't feel like she was allowed to have these problems and these feelings and allowed to work them out externally.
Especially like with Shin-ae, because it's again that feeling of like, you have things so bad. How can I possibly be allowed to have negative feelings towards you, about you? It makes me sad because jealousy is such a raw, real feeling, and it does make you feel really ugly. There's a lot of shame about it too, because how do you talk to somebody about all of your jealousies without feeling like a nasty little villain person,
Yeah, and I was gonna say something and I lost it.
Like, I feel like I'm failing to find all of the words I want to say about her right now, which makes me feel awful because of how much I love her. But we're gonna get there. We might just have to like talk in circles.
Oh, we've got the chat feels very strongly about Maya. We should take.
I love this.
I'm gonna put a little note: reading break, so that I can chop this out so that it's not eternal for everyone listening on the YouTubes and the Spotify's.
Okay, I think we can end reading break and go back to talking.
I need another second because I talked.
Oh, okay. I'll talk through reading break.
Ed. I'm sorry, someone brought up emotes. Okay. We are good to return from reading break, and it sounds like you have a specific place you want to go. So
Okay. So I really like Solidarity's comment, so I'm going to read hers first. She wants acknowledgement and acceptance so bad. She was sorry from her parental roles. And the conflict of, for so long, the only person she got that from was her beloved brother, who she also likely views as the source that was soaking up all of their mom's admiration and attention. She must feel guilty for feeling envious of Min-Hyuk for this, while also infinitely loving her brother because he was so much more than just a good big brother to her. What esteem, if any, would she have without Min-Hyuk? And he even calls out their mom gently. I do feel like the guilt is probably what really holds Maya in place. The guilt both because, Min-Hyuk does go out of his way to take care of her a lot. He goes out of his way to call out their mom. He goes out of his way to take care of people. Like, he calls her out when she's being unfair to Shin-ae and listening to rumors and casting judgment on her without knowing whether or not they're true. And, she keeps this in mind later on when she sees Shin-ae in a situation. And, she echoes the kinds of things that her brother says to defend Shin-ae. Obviously, it doesn't work out in her favor. But, she does it. He is somebody who she has a lot of admiration for. So that guilt is absolutely there. And then she's got that guilt towards Shin-ae because, again, who is she to have these feelings? So much of what compels her to bottle everything up and carry all of this within her is just all of this guilt. And again, like, where do you funnel all of that? Where do you channel all of that? And I think what really gets to me is that it is so clear that she does care about Shin-ae. It's just there are so many other feelings in the way of their authentic friendship being able to bloom. It's hard for them to develop an authentic friendship when both of them are just kind of shoved into it and never given the chance for it to organically grow. How do you develop a friendship when now you already have this pre-existing resentment, when you have all of this ugly, petty jealousy existing that makes it really hard for you to get close to this person? But we also get to see that, like, Maya cares so much about Shin-ae that she, like, tackled Kosuke early in the manga, in the webtoon.
She would not have thrown this random rich boy in the hospital to the ground if she didn't genuinely care about Shin-ae.
Right, like, I always go back to that because, like, that is the scene that proves Maya cares about her. It's just, it's so hard to express your feelings and show what somebody means to you. I love the episode where Shin-ae, figures out she's got a crushy-wushy because we get that wonderful look into their relationships, into, like, what Maya and Rika's friendship is like, what Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk's friendship is like, but also what Maya and Shin-ae really admire about each other and what they get from each other's relationships. We know that, Maya did have her eyes closed when they were talking at one point in time. So we know that Maya is still, working on her feelings. Which, is fair. Like, obviously that stuff doesn't go away overnight. She's still got to work through that, and it's going to take some time. But we know that... Oh, go ahead.
I also want to say, like, in addition to that just being very real, that those feelings don't just go away because you aired them out, it's also like she in that moment is letting herself be allowed to have those complicated feelings. Like, obviously we can see that she still seems to feel guilt about it, but she doesn't just pretend that everything's fine. When Shin-ae asks her, she's like, this isn't the time for that, but we can talk about that later. And like she's allowing those complex feelings to be there, even though they're still hard to have.
Right. And I feel like it's such a big step in their relationship because obviously it's something that they wouldn't have done before. And the fact that they do get to talk about the things that they admire about each other means that they have so much foundation. I like that Shin-ae got to confess that it's not that she dislikes all of those girly things. It's just that she's, kind of afraid of them. She's a little intimidated that these are things that she really admires about them, and that maybe we're going to get to see that trajectory in the future of Maya and Rika and Shin-ae getting to explore that together, and maybe that's, part of their future. I really look forward to that. Like, while it's been made explicitly clear that, Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk are always going to have this closer bond, we get to see that Shin-ae and Maya do have a bond. There is a friendship for them to explore that, will organically grow between them. It may not ever be the same thing that it is with her and Min-Hyuk, but that's okay because, Maya also has Rika. As Shin-ae is learning, not all friendships are going to be equal. I mean, she's already said it herself. She was, being a little dense. She didn't know what she was going on about. But it is true. Not all friendships are going to be equal. But that doesn't make them lesser. And I just think it's really... I think it'll be really nice to see this from Maya's perspective, too. Just because it must have been so painful.
And it's like you said, like, none of these relationships are the same. And, like, they'll never be Min-Hyuk and Shin-ae, and they'll never be Maya and Rika, but their relationship is unique. They have a unique dynamic with each other that brings out different things in each other than these other relationships. Like, when 235 dropped, like, I was talking about how, like, as much as the way that Shin-ae and Maya's conversation went down was a little over the top and, like, dramatic, like, it was ultimately good for her, like, what other character currently in the story with the relationships that they have could we imagine Shin-ae having, like, such strong emotional, like, semi-breakthrough moments with on this topic? She's likely would not have gotten there in that, like, same kind of space, even though, she's still dense and she's not there. It was like, it was so clear that it was like, this is time for their relationship to, like, have something of its own and to really shine. And, for all the, like, all the good or bad or, like, the teenageness of it, like, it's something really unique to them. It's something that they're building on their own authentically now. Where, like, something that we wrote in our notes, that our notes are not at all structured for how we've been talking today, but something that we have in our notes is that one of the things that Maya really wants and needs is, like, to connect with people better and feel more like a genuine part of something than, a force of circumstance. And I think that's something that is at least very similar to what Solidaritea wrote when she was talking about some of the characters. And, like, that is so much of, like, what kind of drives a lot of Maya's interpersonal conflict, where she doesn't feel like she is genuinely acknowledged and accepted and valued for who she is. She feels like she's just forced into these relationships by circumstance, by proxy. And in this kind of rebirth of her friendship with Shin-ae, like, she's learning to find a space where she is able to be authentically there with someone who isn't Rika,
Right. Because the other thing about Maya and Shin-ae's relationship, like, all of the, being forced into this aside, is the fact that Maya could feel that Shin-ae was also very reluctant about the friendship. Mm-hmm. Like, so much about why she was upset with Shin-ae was because Shin-ae was not opening up to her. She was upset that Shin-ae was reaching out to other people, that she was going to other people. And even though obviously Shin-ae has her reasons for it, and they were valid reasons, Maya still felt slighted. Here she is trying to be a friend. Is she doing a great job of it? Maybe not. It's, it's kind of hard to be a friend with their circumstances, but she's trying. And then, here's Shin-ae, and she's going to other people, and she's not telling them things, and she's keeping these secrets. And they're not small secrets, like, hey, my father is in the hospital. We almost got evicted. These are really big deals. And it must, like, if I found out that my best friend went through all of this and, like, didn't tell me anything, I too would kind of feel really upset, because it's like, why, I want you to feel like you can talk to me about these things. in the same way that Dita feels really slighted to realize that he doesn't know anything about, who he thought Youngie was, that, Noel is this whole other person that he knew nothing about. Maya feels very similar with Shin-ae because there's just so much about her she doesn't know. Even Maya and Rika joke about, the way that Shin-ae is so food motivated because they don't realize, they don't know that she lives in food poverty. They don't realize that she's so food motivated because she doesn't know when her next meal is going to be. Like, there's just all of these little details about her that Shin-ae doesn't tell them about because she doesn't want to be a burden, like she just doesn't want people to worry about her. But, that, like we've talked about before, part of love is allowing yourself to be a burden to people. It's allowing them to worry about you. And Maya feels so slighted because, to her, it means Shin-ae doesn't see her as a friend. She's not treating her like a friend. She's not acknowledging her. It's not a genuine relationship. So why should she make any effort?
And both of them are held back by both their own sense of not wanting to be a burden to other people and their perception that the other person isn't, letting their whole heart out and being authentic, where Maya is afraid of being a burden to and letting down Min-Hyuk in, these resentments that she feels about Shin-ae that she doesn't feel like she's allowed to air, and that makes Maya distant. And then Shin-ae doesn't want to be a burden and letting these other people in on her problems, especially because she can feel that, Maya and Rika might not have become friends with her authentically of their own will, even though she didn't realize that it was a literal deal. And that causes Shin-ae to be distant. And then Maya feels that distance, so she pulls away and feels resentment that, Shin-ae won't let her in, and Shin-ae feels that distance from Maya, and so she doesn't let her in because she doesn't want to bare her heart to someone who isn't bearing theirs. And it's just this ongoing cycle of, because neither of them felt like they were allowed to share their burdens and let themselves be a burden, that, these distances and inauthenticities and resentments festered. And then we have that big explosive, confrontation where they just air it all out, which is absolutely what they needed, because you can't go on like that, and you can't form that genuine relationship without it. It goes back to that comment that we already read with the parallel between, like you said, Noel, Dieter, and Soushi with Shin-ae, Maya, and Rika, where it's people who want to be genuine friends, but there's secrets and inauthentic aspects that prevent them from being open, and they have to try to figure out how to move forward with that and struggle with it.
And now that all of those secrets are out, I guess the boys are still working on that. But with the girls, I really do look forward to seeing how those relationships develop. Because, we've seen what happens to Maya if her needs aren't met. That's what that entire arc was. That's what led to them blowing up. Unfortunately, she blew up with somebody who is more understanding than others might be. That is, once again, the saving grace of Shin-ae, is that she is somebody who is so empathetic and understanding, who genuinely wants to make those connections as well. And can understand that, I get it. I understand why you were jealous and upset. Shin-ae doesn't have that mindset of, where Maya fears that she's not allowed to feel hurt and slighted because Shin-ae has things worse. Shin-ae doesn't carry that chip on her shoulder. She knows that she has things worse, but does that mean that Maya isn't allowed to be hurt? Of course Maya is allowed. She's never going to, hold that against her. And yeah, I really look forward to seeing how those relationships grow, because like you said, I feel like Maya absolutely was the person to have that conversation with. I don't think Rika would ever have pushed the truth towards Shin-ae, and I think Shin-ae would have continued to run away from the truth about her feelings for Noel. It's especially the fact that Maya has been the person who all along has been trying to hook Shin-ae up with random guys. So for her to have that moment of realization that, oh my god, you actually like this person. That moment where Shin-ae says, like, if I can't have you, and the way Kimchi draws Maya's face, and Maya is just us. Love it. It was art. It was so well done. You're right. I don't think anybody else could have done that role. Like, who else could have? Like, she doesn't really have anyone else. I don't think Rika would have pushed it. Although, to be fair, I think people treat Rika a little more maturely than she really is, because, like, we cannot forget the night that Noel called Shin-ae back when she was at the hospital, and Rika found her on the phone in the bathroom on the floor, and she's like, "Are you on the phone with my dad's hot boss?" And she's just like teasing, you know, like we have to remember that Rika too is a teenage girl. Like, I think people assign like a maturity to her that like denies the, you know, silly schoolgirl aspect of her. But I still feel like it was Maya who was right.
I feel like Rika is grounded, but she, like you said, is still very much a teenage girl. And I feel like she would have been very patient with Shin-ae, which maybe 100 chapters ago is what Shin-ae would have been. But in this moment, you know, girls go, go, go. She is feral. She is going off buddy. She is having all these emotions that she doesn't understand and doesn't know what to do with. And I think
she's biting people.
She is biting people. I think she really just needed someone to push her towards it. Where like she's still not there, but she's so much closer. And I feel like it really shows the changes that have happened in the relationship. That, like you said, Maya at first was the one just like throwing Shin-ae towards anyone who would look at her like a piece of meat, you know, where it wasn't actually about Shin-ae. It was Maya just trying desperately to like find
get rid of her.
Yeah, like she was just trying desperately to make something out of this relationship that at that point, like, even though they cared about each other, the relationship itself didn't mean, like, it wasn't meaningful at that point. Whereas now at this point, like, she's actually taking a step back and like watching Shin-ae's reactions and listening to what she says and understanding what's going on in Shin-ae's own head better than Shin-ae herself understands it, where she's not brushing it off. She's not just, you know, she's not just doing the like boy crazy, like, oh, there's a boy in your life and you like him. Like she is genuinely like invested in Shin-ae's actual feelings here, which is so different from the way that she was approaching the conversation of Shin-ae and romance at the start. And it really just shows that like new foundation of their relationship.
I think too, as much as like it obviously is that growing friendship of, you know, real friendship, I think we also are getting like that taste of Maya and Shin-ae as siblings, you know? And to be fair, I think that's kind of always existed, because we know Shin-ae views Min-Hyuk as family. He's very much an older brother to her, which kind of makes, you know, Maya, you know, by default also a sister, but they're actually developing that bond now. And again, I love it. Like, it's such a family bond. Like, you know, Maya teasing her about her crushy wushy, and like, is it wrong to air that in front of their family? You know, yeah, probably, but like, is that do we not all do that? You know, like, again, Maya is so realistic. Like,
yeah. And it's like, also, like, to be fair, like, was it right for Shin-ae to bite Maya?
Right? Like, you know, kick her out of her own room. Bit her, kicked her out of her own room. Like, you know, Maya, I feel like Maya's allowed to torment her a little bit.
Where it's like, were either of those things the right thing? Like, is either girl in this scenario like all good, everything's like fine, they're doing everything totally right? No, absolutely not. They're like you said, they're building and being that sibling relationship where, like, you know, you retaliate at each other, but you do it with love. But that doesn't mean it's right.
Right. And like, I think that's supposed to be the point. Like, I feel like, and maybe this is because I'm getting older, because I fully admit that I used to be the kind of person who, like, I liked my characters to, you know, like, be good people. And by that, you know, like, I wanted the characters to make the good moral choices, right? And now I'm at that point where I'm like, give me the messy characters, right? And not, now I'm at the point where I'm like, why do they have to make the right choices? Like, they're frickin' 17-year-olds. Of course you're going to tease people like that. Like when your friend gets a new boyfriend and then like you all go to school and then you're like, oh, you're a little boyfriend in front of all of your other friends, and this is how all of your friends find out now that they're dating. Like, that is just what that's friendship. And like, if you've got problems with that, then you address it with your friend. But that doesn't, mean it applies to everything. And in I Love You, it's clearly they're feral right now. We can't try and control what's happening. I found it to be such a breath of fresh air that for a character like Shin-ae, who has never even gotten to experience being a teenager, who has had to carry burdens and responsibilities on behalf of her father and just trying to help keep them afloat, that she even gets to have these experiences, like...
And we know that she wants them. Like, as much as she's not happy in that moment, we know that throughout the series, like, she's been longing for the kind of, like, what she perceives as, like, the kind of fun, carefree teenage experience that Maya and Rika are able to have that she doesn't have the capacity in her life for.
A couple years from now, when they've all moved past from this, assuming Noel hasn't, like, shattered her heart to 1,000 little pieces... she's gonna laugh at this. It's all gonna be like a really funny memory. Again, I think that is the real beauty of her relationship with Maya, is that she gets to have those experiences that she didn't before. The things that she has really envied in Maya and Rika's friendship. And again, like I said, I'm really excited to see how that develops. I cannot wait to see them in the future, in the second season, and what kind of relationships they've developed, like what kind of dynamic they have. Because like you said, we know that Maya and Rika are always going to have a special relationship in the same way that Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk are always going to have a special relationship. But that doesn't mean that Maya, Shin-ae, and Rika won't have a special relationship of their own.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the other relationships aren't valuable.
Right. It just, something that I think one of the most important things that I learned as I got older, because, we all want to be the person who believes that our friendships are going to be all enduring and that they're all going to be special, is that there's nothing wrong in having relationships for different purposes, right? Like, we all get something from different friendships. This friendship provides me something that perhaps this friendship doesn't, but this friendship gives me something else, And, obviously, Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk get something out of this relationship that she's clearly not going to get out of her relationship with Maya and Rika. And that's why you have lots of friends sometimes. Maybe.
Yeah, no, and like we said, everyone's a different person. So, the combination that you form with one person isn't going to be the same as the combination that you form with somebody else. And that's okay. And those relationships are just unique and valuable in their own ways. Like we said, 235 could not have happened with Min-Hyuk.
Oh God, no.
Oh God, no. That's something unique and special to Shin-ae and Maya's relationship. And there's plenty of those things for every combination of people.
And it's funny because, we agree, Min-Hyuk and Shin-ae do have a closer bond right now. But there's no way he could have been that role. The thought of Min-Hyuk trying to be like, oh, do you think it's possible that you like this guy? No, I cannot see that conversation happening. And not even, because, some weird archaic, oh, he's a boy, he can't have these conversations with you. It's just, we know, first off, that Min-Hyuk, does not like Noel or Tosuke for that fact. For, that matter. There's no way he can even look at these guys as even possibly, having any amount of feelings for Shin-ae, because it's he's seeing them and he's just these people are bastards. Why are they even here? Let alone, why is Shin-ae so obsessed with this guy? Girl, stop thinking about him. What is your problem? Are you okay? Do you have a fever? Is something wrong with you? The thought of Min-Hyuk saying crushy wushy is actually really funny. I'm not gonna lie.
But I also like that was a great set of two messages where someone said can't see Min-Hyuk saying crushy wushy, but the person before them said that's why Min-Hyuk sent Maya. And you said it kind of as a joke, but he did. He literally sent Maya in. He was like, I don't feel like I'm the right person for this job.
Because he was assessing the situation, he saw Shin-ae biting off Shimhan's head, and he was like, I don't know what's going on here. Something's wrong with Shin-ae. She's malfunctioning. Maya, you go deal with this. Also, like, not to, like, jump on, like, the stereotypes, but Min-Hyuk lives in a household that's, like, all females besides him. He knows girls on periods. I'm just putting that out there.
Min-Hyuk was like, this sounds like a female issue. But
yep. Like, well, feral time of the month. Maya, this is your job. You go deal with this.
But also, like, I think it was Mina, as soon as Shin-ae gets home, like, is like, Simhan and Min-Hyuk, like, you two are Shin-ae's supports. Shin-ae is closest to you two. You two go deal with this. And both of them just strike out on all counts because they're, as much as they are two of the people closest to Shin-ae, they were just not the right people for the problem that Shin-ae had at that point. And, Maya's sitting there in the background the whole time with kind of this, like, I think I know what's going on. Because she's not seeing Shin-ae through their biases, where they know a version of Shin-ae that is not the person having this feral, crushy-wushy breakdown. And they... Oh, what?
I was going to say the other thing that always stands out to me about this moment, too, is the fact that Maya is the only person who has consistently seen Shin-ae all of these years. Because, Min-Hyuk is ahead of them in school. So, there have been parts of their lives where he wasn't even in the same school as them. Like, we really got to see this with some of the flashbacks where, Maya was there when she saw how Shin-ae lets things roll off of her shoulders and just kind of ignores things. She is the one who knows better than any of them, even Min-Hyuk, how Shin-ae doesn't get worked up like this. She is the person who knows that there is something up. And it is something that, Dad and Min-Hyuk sure aren't thinking about. Like, she is the person who knows because she is the person who can identify what is so different about Shin-ae and how it is unlike who she's ever been before now. And that is such an important element. And again, why Maya was the person. Like, Min-Hyuk has never seen Shin-ae behave like this, but also he's never, he didn't really see those other elements of her and how, there's that significance of how Shin-ae let those things roll off of her shoulders in the past. And how Maya is able to acknowledge that this means something. This person means something.
Yeah. And I feel like we've talked about most things that we want to about Maya. Is there anything that we want to bring in still?
No, I was kind of like using this as a segue into Min-Hyuk.
Okay. I felt like we were segueing into Min-Hyuk, but I didn't want to kill the momentum if there was still anything going on with Maya.
Yeah, I think we've covered her.
Transitions are filtering between good and not so good tonight, but we're trying really hard to stick to this 2 hours. We got like 15 minutes left.
It might be 2.5 hours, but it won't be 3 hours.
We will not be here for 4 hours, guys. You guys can go to sleep.
No, we won't let you. No, I think actually Min-Hyuk is a really easy one to talk about. Compared to the others, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I feel also because like we said before, like a lot of what we have learned about Min-Hyuk has kind of come through other people's past.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he's kind of bouncing off of these other people in a way.
Yeah.
And like
I think a lot of what Min-Hyuk, or what was I trying to say? Like, no, you go ahead. What cut might be it?
I was gonna say that like we have gotten some glimpses into Min-Hyuk's like, his own what's going on in him, and that's like he sent that panel a while ago about Min-Hyuk talking about you can't make people change their minds, like, and convince them to stay. You know, it's not within your power. You have to accept things how they are sometimes. Where, like, and, you know, him, like, kind of closing his eyes at the, like, are you friends with everyone, in the way that we see his friendships evolve. But we don't have a lot of the additional context around it and his actual, like, processing and emotions that we have with other characters. So a lot of what we know about him is gleaned through the way that he has interacted with other people and the observations of the way that people treat him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think Min-Hyuk is the one who is a little more speculation than the others. Just because, like you said, we're gleaning a lot of him through other characters and through, you know, kind of the literary devices that Kimchi has given us. One of my earlier writing pieces, I guess, a long time ago, I remember writing about the parallels between Noel and Min-Hyuk as the people who, you know, are like Shin-ae's protectors and the different ways that they do it. And, you know, like how Min-Hyuk is very hands-on because he carries a lot of that guilt from not being there the day that Shin-ae got hurt, because he knew that, you know, he was the only person who cared about Shin-ae. He was the only person who was going to be able to, you know, help her. He was the only person who could stop other people. So for him, he has to be hands-on. It's the only way he knows how to protect people. Where, you know, Noel has always been more hands-off. He nudges people. He works in the background. He kind of does things through the shadows. A lot of the way that he helps and protects Shin-ae is very. It doesn't happen in front of her, you know? Like, when he goes to confront Kosuke about, like, you signed her up for classes. Did you even, like, think about, you know, talking to her about it first? Things like that. And just, like, the different ways that they address that protection of her. And I had a lot of fun writing it, because obviously Min-Hyuk's role is very much the protector. He is such a knight role. And, you know, like, he's got that male figure of the family. Oh, Ren went and pulled that up. Wow, thank you.
I love you guys. This is a really stark contrast to what's happening with T right now, which I'm not going to say out loud on the recording. But
we can actually put a link to that piece in the information for this episode too.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I had a lot of fun writing that, because I think there's some really good parallels in how these are two people who clearly care a lot about Shin-ae and want to help her, but they go about doing it in different ways. And obviously, you know, Min-Hyuk is learning to be more hands-off, but, you know, he is very much the knight. And, you know, we can tell that a lot of that was formed through being the kind of male figure of the household, right? We know that, or at least we can assume that Daddy Park hasn't been around. He's probably not alive.
We know for a fact that he's not alive, because they refer to him
as that fast pass information or not?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind. We know that Daddy Park isn't alive. You know,
it's referred to at the party when, like, people in the background are talking about how they know Mina and how they were invited. Someone says that they
okay. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we know that he's not alive, because they say that they worked with her husband, but that's the only reference we ever gotten to him. And as my and Min-Hyuk's flashbacks have gone, he's never been shown. And we know that he was gone by the time they were in middle school, because Mina had her eyes on a little Simhan.
Yeah. So, like, we can assume that Min-Hyuk has definitely, you know, grown up feeling like, I'm the man of this family. I'm gonna protect them, you know.
Mina has kind of filed him into that role a bit too. I think it's a push coming from both of them. I don't think it's just on Mina or just on Min-Hyuk. I feel like Min-Hyuk was probably, you know, this young boy who loses his father, and then he, like you said, is now the man of the house, and he feels the kind of call and need to become that protector and become that knight and take on those responsibilities and roles from this very young age. But Mina, something that we've talked about, is that she is very much like a boy mom, and this ties into why Maya had so many self-esteem issues, where like she very much was funneling Min-Hyuk into like, come learn the family business, the bakery. Come do this. You know, you're like the oldest son with all the achievements. Yeah, let's all go to Min-Hyuk's tournament and just support him in his, in his endeavors and his skills. And so he has all this like, and he's doing things that are authentic to him other than the baking. But there's all that like kind of funneling into that role from both of them.
And it definitely puts a lot on Min-Hyuk's shoulders, too. Like, I mean, as much as it takes a burden off of Maya, if you want to look at it that way, it means that there's a lot riding on Min-Hyuk's shoulders. And like we established earlier, Min-Hyuk does do a good job trying to advocate for Maya. He does, try to call Mina out on things, but there's only so much you can do, like you can only parent your parents so much. You can't control people very well.
Yeah.
But go on.
This might not be a good place to interject, but before we lose it, poor Solidarity just pointed out, drunk, overworked, absent Simhan got more attention from Mina than Maya did. Min-Hyuk loves Shin-ae. Mina loves Simhan. Maya was just effed rip. And like,
ouch.
I know that ties back into the Maya point, but yeah, that was the dynamic that was happening, where everyone has this person except for Maya, and that alongside of Mina like putting all of her like energy and hopes and expectations into her oldest born son.
And the thing is, we know that Min-Hyuk loves Maya, but it goes back to that thing about where Shin-ae is the one who is more, we'll say unfortunate. So she is the person who gets, Min-Hyuk funnels a lot more of that energy into taking care of her. Maya has Rika, in Min-Hyuk's eyes, Maya is okay. She is secured. She has a friend. She doesn't have needs in the same way that this poor girl who is shunned by the whole school, whose new friend has just turned on her, who is literally going through hell, and then, has a fall that Min-Hyuk knows was not just a simple accident. Like, I think what makes it so tragic is we understand how it all plays out the way that it does, and we understand how Min-Hyuk develops that feeling and why he has this very grandiose, I have to take care of Shin-ae feelings, where it becomes so easy to look at Maya, who isn't speaking up about her problems, who's bottling everything up in the same way that Dita does, and think, okay, she doesn't need me. She's got Rika, she's doing fine, she's doing great. Shin-ae needs me, so I'm going to do this. I think it's important to point out that Min-Hyuk, also isn't purposely ignoring Maya's needs. It's just the way that it looks on the surface is that, yeah, Maya looks like she's doing great. She's the one who looks secure. And that's clearly not the case.
Yeah.
Go on.
When he overhears that like blowout fight that they have, the first thing that he does is he goes to Maya and he's like, I'm so sorry. Like I was ignoring your needs. I didn't see them. I thought you were okay and you weren't, and it was wrong of me to put these like burdens on you without even checking if you were actually okay with it. And like,
I remember that making me cry. It was, like Maya, like I said, she's my girl, and that's just such a good moment because obviously Min-Hyuk, he takes his protector role very seriously, and he takes his role as Maya's brother very seriously. It's not that he wanted to ignore her, he just didn't see those needs. And again, that's why we gotta advocate for ourselves. That's why nobody is going to help you if you don't ask for help. It was so important for them to have that conversation and establish that, yeah, it really hurt her that he just kind of pushed her into this role without ever actually asking her, is this something that you want to do?
And like, we're in kind of potentially the opposite way that we were talking about how like Soushi is a much more perceptive character than he gets credit for, and like Dieter is a very perceptive character. Min-Hyuk sometimes is not. Like, he's sometimes a little inaccurate in the way that he's paying attention, but sometimes he draws the wrong conclusions. Like Solidarity pointed out that, he falsely anticipated that Maya and Shin-ae would definitely get along in the same way that he falsely anticipated that Dieter and Shin-ae would definitely date. Where, like, sometimes he reads the dynamics between people wrong, and he thinks, because I see this thing and I see this thing as okay, so surely it's going to be fine.
Min-Hyuk is like me, where you have friends and you're like, I love this friend and I love this other friend, and because I love them, surely they're going to get along so well, because, like, if I love them, they're totally going to have things in common, and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But also, he's not a very detail-oriented person, and I think that's, like, where that failing is. Like, you've got... It's not enough to be like, okay, yeah, Maya and Shin-ae are in the same grade, they're the same age. Yeah, they're gonna get along great. Like, you gotta know the details, because what is it that makes people get along great,
And something that, like, that's kind of a recurring theme for him, where he is a bit more of a broad strokes person, with the, like, Shin-ae was hurt and suffering, so he needs to focus his attention on her so that she doesn't suffer alone. He's the knight and the protector, so he needs to protect everyone, but he's, just kind of stretching himself over everyone. He's using these kind of, like, blanket rules where, like, he needs to protect Shin-ae, therefore he needs to deny her agency if he thinks that something is unsafe, and, like, go do things for her. And, like, even with, like, his social life, before Shin-ae's fall, he had these kind of shallow friendships with the whole school. And where, he has his eyes closed when he's talking, possibly because when she asks if he's friends with the whole school and he says yes, he's lying a little bit because those friendships are so shallow. And, like, when it counts and when he's, like, really made aware of something, he does follow through well. Where, like, when push came to shove, he went for that friendship with Shin-ae, and he picked the one that mattered over all of the ones that didn't. Where, that one friendship with Shin-ae was worth so much more than all of those shallow friendships with those other kids. When he finds out what's going on with Maya and Shin-ae, he immediately goes and validates Maya and talks through it with her and tries to help. He isn't there yet with the Shin-ae and autonomy thing, but he's able to have that conversation with her and, like at least try to back off a little bit, and presumably will get there. But on his own, he does tend to fall into these broad strokes patterns, and something that kind of keeps coming up is him, having to learn to read the details when they start, going right into his face.
It's really interesting because I think that creates a loose parallel between him and Dita, in a sense that, Min-Hyuk is obviously very much a people person, right? Like, he even says that he likes people, and I think that part was authentic. He does enjoy being around people. He likes companionship and company, but companionship does not necessarily equate to friendship, right?
Yeah.
I think he's very much a go-with-the-flow kind of person, in a way that Dita is trying to be. But, like you said, a lot of those friendships are just shallow. They're companionship. It's like, I'm hanging out with this person because I enjoy hanging out with this person, but it doesn't make them my best friend. Just because you hang out with these people doesn't mean that you're going to put your life on the line for them like he will for Shin-ae. And I think that's a really interesting element of him, because, right, I think that's why his eyes are closed when he answers that, yes, he's friends with everyone in the school. Because he's not truly friends with everyone. He gets along with people in the school, and maybe he can make use of people in the school. Not to, like, make it sound like he's a manipulative person, but if you're the kind of person who kind of gets along with everybody and, you can kind of work your magic with everybody, you can kind of, like, earn favors from people, right? I mean, obviously,
or, like, spare keys or shutting down rumors.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when he makes his ultimate choice and chooses Shin-ae over everybody, it kind of blows all of that up. But it's okay, because he's off to high school, so what does it matter,
And, like, we we see that he's continued to value Shin-ae so much above all of those other relationships where he doesn't regret that at all. You know, he knew what he was losing in picking Shin-ae, and she was still worth it.
And I think that really makes it significant that he chose to go to school in Chicago, because how hard must that decision have been for him? And then especially because he goes to school, this is his first semester away, and while he's gone, once again, Shin-ae gets hurt. Her dad ends up in the hospital. She almost gets evicted. Things get so bad that she is staying with his family. So, you know, he does the very Min-Hyuk thing and takes all of his exams early and rushes home. Like, right? How is he going to go back to school?
It must so much feel to him like every time that he's away, and like ultimately every time that he's doing something for himself, something bad happens to her where he really does need to be there 24/7 to protect her. And we see how that plays into the way that he acts around her, where he takes initiative and he does kind of smother her and deny her autonomy. But to him, it's like so much horrible stuff has always happened to her when he's gone. And like, you know, especially considering like what she said at the end of the flashbacks, where Min-Hyuk was being recruited for sports at the end of middle school. Like, he could have gone to any high school that he wanted, but he picked the one closest to Shin-ae. And so like you said, the fact that when he does finally kind of branch out and like go back to pursuing those own goals for himself and letting himself ease off of protecting Shin-ae to do so, that it all blows up so horribly.
Like, I know that as a fandom, we've talked a lot about how, you know, yes, it is very out of line for Min-Hyuk to make a lot of these decisions for Shin-ae and, you know, to impose on her autonomy. And, you know, I still stand by that. But it's one of those things that Kimchi does so well with the black and white morality and those shades of gray, where it's like, I understand why he feels so compelled. I understand why he can't help it. Like, it terrifies him. Like, I think about, you know, that episode where she keeps waking up in the hospital room and there he is screaming about how he's the only damn kid in that school who cares about her, and how, like, that has to haunt her or haunt him. Like, I think about a lot how we know that Maya carries her own guilt about how she left early with Rika that day and she wasn't there when Shin-ae fell. I think a lot
of own resentment that led her to do that. That same resentment that she felt so guilty about that she didn't bring up.
Right. I think a lot about how obviously Alyssa must carry so much horror and guilt about it that clearly has never, you know, been tackled. And we know that Min-Hyuk carries so much of it that has been transformed into this obligation to take care of Shin-ae. And like you said, that when he finally gets to the point where he's like, okay, I can do this. I can go to school halfway around the world. It's okay. It's only going to be a few months at a time. Shin-ae's a big girl. She can take care of herself. I'm going to be back. And then everything hits the fan when he leaves. Like, I you know, we kind of can't blame him for why he meddles. Like, I'm not saying it's good and right for him to meddle, but I'm also saying I understand why he feels compelled, because, like, that must terrify him. You know?
It's just like all of our characters were like, their life experiences have clearly corroborated their viewpoints and what they think they have to do. And like, we as the omniscient, you know, bird's eye, like, third person reader can see the bigger picture sometimes. But, you know, when you just think of what is their experience, what does this look like from their perspective, what does this feel like for them, it's so understandable how they funnel into the choices that they do.
And it also speaks volumes about how much Min-Hyuk loves her. Like, I don't even want to say, like, cares about her. Like, he loves her, like, in the same way that she sees him as family. He clearly sees the same for her. It, you know, the whole, he took in this stray cat who everyone else in school was being so cruel to, and she became his best friend, the person who he forsakes all of his friends for. And I am like this close to the tears, so hold on. Jesus, what the? I've got feelings, guys. She was a wet cat middle school, okay? Like, tell me she was not like a scrappy little feral kitten. Not even a feral. She was just a stray. She was a stray.
Did you see what Casey said? Shin-ae is
Min-Hyuk. Oh, she is.
Oh.
And that's like that's exactly it. Like, okay, I think I'm composed now. I can do this. Like, it's so clear that she means so much to him and that he meddles because he loves and because he cares. And he's trying so hard, and it's something that you can't break overnight, especially when so much of your meddling is rooted in I'm doing this because I care and I'm trying to unlearn this. Like, I think obviously it was good for him to come back and be able to see that she is somebody who's now learning to take care of herself. She's opening up to people. She's making friends, genuine friends on her own that he didn't have to arrange. She's forming authentic friendships with Maya and Rika, though, you know, that are born outside of his arrangement. Like, he probably feels a lot of complicated feelings, you know, like, it's so good to see her growing up, right? But like, you still can't quite fully let go of your worries and fears, you know, because every time he leaves, every time he does something for himself, his little wet cat keeps getting into trouble.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, like you said, like she
and it doesn't change that she is still employed by the Hiraharas, who, you know, he met her boss, like the person she directly is working with, Kosuke. He watched him punch his brother, who, you know, fell to the ground, and then they found him bleeding out. Like,
it
just
doesn't look good for them.
Right. It looks terrible. And then it's like, wait a second. He's going to prison? Excuse me? Shin-ae, girl, babe, sit down. Look me in the eye. What the fuck is wrong? Right. Like, I need Min-Hyuk to just kind of like, I need him to go lay down in bed, and I need him to reflect on that night that, you know, Shin-ae came and woke him up on the couch and was like, hey, hold my hand. How's that feel? I want to think about this and like start connecting it to the things he's learning about her. Also, like, I just love that moment because like Shin-ae being like, how's that feel? And I'm just like, baby girl, don't say that. that sounds so no. No. Girl.
Like getting into Kimchi does this thing a lot where she contrasts Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk's relationship with other relationships of like theoretically the same variety. Like she contrasts it with like that relationship Shin-ae and Noel have, which is, as we know, a romantic one. She contrasts it with the relationship between Shin-ae and her sister and Shin-ae and her father, these family relationships. And we see these kind of themes of like different forms of love and also like your found family and what constitutes your family through Min-Hyuk, where like never has ever been implied that the relationship between Shin-ae has been, or ever will be less valuable just because she's forming a romantic connection with Noel. They're different relationships and they're both so important, but like there is no like underlying like feelings of romance between one of them for the other with her and Min-Hyuk. There's no like once she gets a guy, like Min-Hyuk's no longer going to be important, or like they're going to drift apart. At least like I don't get the impression that that's going to happen.
Min-Hyuk,
it does, not because of the guy. But
Min-Hyuk and Shin-ae are so important to me as platonic soulmates.
Yes.
Specifically because a lot of the arguments against Noel and Shin-ae were like, oh, I like them better as platonic soulmates. And it's like, no, she's already got that. That's Min-Hyuk. Like, he already plays that role. She already has that platonic soulmate.
I was saying, and it's such an important relationship. Like, there's nothing else takes the place.
Right. Like, when she talks to Noel about Min-Hyuk, she always talks about my best friend, you know, like, which cracks me up, by the way, because, like, I know sometimes I'll, like, refer to my bestie, but, like, I have, like, 3-5 people who, like, I call my bestie, right? Like, I don't have, like, the one like Shin-ae does. So it's always funny to me when she's talking to Noel and she's like, oh, I can't do anything on the 21st, though, because my best friend's coming back and we're going to be having a party on that day, you know, like, she has made it so clear that he is so important to her. And, like, we know that, like, Noel, I mean, I already assume Noel's not going to try and, like, take that role, you know?
And, like, even, like, when, like, we know that she's talked about him multiple times before we even really first see her mention Min-Hyuk, because Noel is in there and he's like, I can't wait to meet Shin-ae's best friend. Like, she talks so highly of him. And like you said, she's making it so clear that this relationship is so important. And
I know this is why, like, everybody wants to see Noel and Dita get along. My brain is just, like, not warding tonight. I know this is why everybody wants to see Noel. Huh?
I say everyone's the same character. Stream episode 3, mirrors and foils.
Genuinely, honestly. I know this is why everybody wants to see Noel and Min-Hyuk get along well, even though, like, I can't remember if I wrote it. I'm pretty sure I wrote it in my, you know, like, Noel and Min-Hyuk parallels, how, like, I knew from the get-go they are not going to get along, specifically because of, like, everything Min-Hyuk knows of him right now. And, like, as the protector role, there's no way in hell he's gonna like this guy. Like, even though he's like, okay, I know, so Shin-ae, you liked this guy for some reason, and I want to trust your judgment. But have you considered he is a convicted, not felon. Have you considered that this man is going to prison? Shin-ae, are you okay? Flashbacks to 8th grade when we were going on our field trips to the prisons, and they started sending us to the women's prison because girls kept coming back with phone numbers from the prisoners. You know, that's Min-Hyuk. He's like, girl, we need to stop and think about this.
We need to talk about jailbird love, because, honey, that's not.
And, like, we know, like, obviously there's going to be a time in the future where, you know, things are probably going to resolve. And, you know, if Noel ever gets to that point where he can resolve, you know, Noel versus Youngie and, you know, marry the two of them, kind of like, you know, we saw when he woke up in the hospital. I think we will get to see them get along in that way. But until then, whew. And it's just like you said, it's funny because Noel does want to meet him. He does want to know the most important person to Shin-ae, but he has not made a good impression at all, has he?
He hasn't. And Min-Hyuk is very much feeling that brother role where he literally sat in front of all of them and was like, listen up, I am your best friend, and if you want to get there, you have to go through me. Everyone, introduce yourselves, form a line. Like, where he's like, he is very much communicating his, like, as much as he's a little overprotective, like, the core of it is that this is a really important relationship, and, like, as much as he needs to cool it, Min-Hyuk has earned the importance in her life to kind of be let slide that he does that sometimes. Where, like, there's that contrast we have with Shin-ae, where, like, when they confront each other, they're both, you know, being like, I'm trying to, you know, play this role in Shin-ae's life and protect her and, like, have this relationship, but only one of them has the authority to do so, even though they both think that they do. Where, like, Shin-ae thinks that she is entitled to a relationship with Shin-ae because she's blood family, whereas, you know, Shin-ae doesn't feel that way, but she lets Min-Hyuk act like a brother because they have built that relationship, and that is a bond that is important to her and will remain important to her. And, like, It's not perfect, because we know that there's things that need to be worked on there, but it's so important. And like through contrasting Min-Hyuk and Shin-ae with these other relationships that oftentimes, especially in media, are portrayed as like inherently more important, and that they like inherently overtake, this kind of platonic soulmate, like best friendship, that Kimchi is demonstrating like, no, they don't. Like, this relationship and this bond that Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk has is special, and it's important, and it does not have any less value than these just because of the circumstances.
God, that means so much to me. Like, I love that, and I can't wait to see how it plays in the future, because I'm sure we will see the heads a little more until, things kind of resolve more. And it's super important to me, like you said, because media does downplay it a lot. There is that sense that once you form your romantic relationship, this becomes the relationship. This is the one that is held above all others. And that, that's not always the case. Romance and platonic relationships can and very often are held at the very same level. Just because you get married to somebody does not mean that, your best friend is somebody who's lesser than this person. Sometimes you do end up marrying somebody who is your best friend, but I always hope that in those cases people still have external best friends, because as established earlier, we have different relationships for different needs. That's just the glory of life. Also, I would like to just take this moment to put on the record and hope that somebody puts in our suggestion box. I think an episode on blood versus found family would be absolutely fantastic. Somebody put that in our suggestion box so we don't forget. Thank you.
Right now.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm going to write a word in the discussion box and open it again once this podcast is finished.
Perfect. Right, because I don't want to get into it right now, since we are, creeping up on our time. But I think there is a lot to be said about, like, the Shin-ae and Min-Hyuk confrontation and relationships in general, and stuff that is kind of fast-passy, so I'm not going to say it.
Yeah. But it's so important. And, like, through both of the Park siblings, we really see, like you said, those different relationships for different things. And Shin-ae is constantly, like, doing those comparisons. And, like, we had it in 235, we had it in the Convince Me, we've had it before, where it's like, they're aware that these relationships all fill different roles in their life, and that's a good thing. That's okay. And, like, Shin-ae is not entirely sure exactly what that is for some people, but, that is a very recurring theme.
And I do like that, Min-Hyuk does feel very secure about that role he plays. I do know somebody pointed out, and I think it was Solidaritea, about how as the protector role, there, Min-Hyuk probably doesn't have people who are checking up on him. That is one of the perils of being the protector, being the knight, is who is sitting there and saying, hey, are you okay? Do you have any needs that aren't being met? And maybe that is something we might wind up seeing explored. While there's a lot that we do know about Min-Hyuk, like we said, a lot of what we've learned about him is gleaned through other people. So we don't really know a lot about, what is he struggling with? We know that he's, we know at his core that he has those protector values, that he wants to be that knight. He wants to protect the people he cares about. But, we don't know what else is driving him. We don't know if there's other parts of him that he might feel lacking, Yeah. I had a thought and I lost it.
It's like you said before, like, Kimchi really shows us things through the eyes and lenses of the characters. And in the same way that, like, none of our characters know what's going on with Min-Hyuk and if he has needs that aren't being met and what he's feeling, because since he's the protector, they're not checking up on him. And we, by extension, have that same experience where, like, none of these characters' eyes have that insight for him, so neither do ours.
Right. And so much of what we know Min-Hyuk does is for others. what does Min-Hyuk do for himself? I mean, obviously we know that Min-Hyuk chose Shin-ae and he chose her for himself, you know. That wasn't like he chose Shin-ae just because he needs to protect her and take care of her, you know, like he didn't have to do that. He chose her because he likes her. That's his person. But, you know, I think there's still a lot for us to learn about him, and I wonder if that's the kind of thing that might come up in future side stories, or if we might get to learn a little more about him in our future second season.
Yeah, I fully expect, especially like the side characters and everyone we talked about this episode, to get a lot more revealed on them in the future, potentially after I Love You is over, but you know, especially by the end of it all and throughout the future season and episode, to learn more about what's actually going on for them in their world and all the things that we haven't been able to see and all the things that had to be cut out due to Webtoon needing Kimchi to speed up the pace. And like I fully expect to have to revisit all these characters. Whether or not there will still be a pod at that time, who knows? You know, it's probably years off. But I think
And fun plug, because we know Kimchi is actually finally going to be getting physical forms of I Love You published. I wonder if she will get the opportunity to do some of the side stories in her published copies.
That would be really cool. I know that there's like, she's hinted that she might slip a couple things in that had to be cut. So I'm really excited to see what comes out. And for anyone who doesn't know, it hasn't been officially announced, but Kimchi knows that we all found it. There is, I Love You is one of the stories that's being published in a physical print with the Webtoon unscrolled thing. And it's also being handled by a team who knows it's not a love triangle.
Thank God.
Very exciting thing to follow up with and keep in mind. It is falsely listed as School Life and Romance on one publisher, which we're really hoping is a mistake pulled from like the Google Books category. Oh no, it's on several of them. This is now getting on a tangent, but oh no. Okay. Well, the team apparently knows what's up. Some of the publishers don't. But
I'm hoping it might be a lot like manga, where sometimes the mangaka, is that how you say it? I've never said that out loud now. Includes little side stories and little additional pieces at the end of the volumes. I'm hoping maybe she'll get the opportunity to do some of her side stories in that way.
Yes. And there's some and talking, like, we wanted to acknowledge this before we leave, with that, on that same kind of topic of like the side stories getting further explored later and the side characters getting further explored later. We are aware that there's kind of a big gaping hole in the side character episode with us missing Rika. We are fully aware, and unfortunately we just didn't feel like we had enough concrete information about her to really devote a segment to her, and we basically didn't want to put words in her mouth. And like, we do a lot of speculation and conjecture around here, but it's usually based on things a little more deliberate and concretely revealed than what we feel like we have about Rika. I'm hoping that we learn more about her in the future to a point where we could feel comfortable doing a podcast segment on her. But at this point, we just kind of have like those little snippets that we touched on about her when we were talking about like Maya. And I think we might have said something about her during Dieter's segment or Soushi segment as well. But yeah, we are aware. We didn't just forget her. We know she's there. We as much as we just verbosely talk for hours and go on and do conjecture, we don't want to just spout words for the sake of putting words out there. We want to have something meaningful to say.
And I do think, I think it was said in a Curious Cat or something like that, that Kimchi has acknowledged that Rika is probably like the most put together character, or the one who has like the least baggage, which is probably why her story hasn't been explored as much. There's just not enough emphasis or there's not enough reason to really focus on her story when there's so many other things to be explored. Like Elle said, I'm hoping we might get to see some of her story more in the future. Perhaps Kimchi can repurpose some of the story she was hoping to explore once we're in that second season. But if not, I do look forward to whatever side stories Kimchi comes up with for their characters. I think Rika is a fantastic character in that she makes a really good anchor between Maya and Shin-ae. But right, like Elle said, a lot of what we could say about her at this point is conjecture. Like, I don't know what Rika's motivations are. I can't really come up with a guess about what her goals are, We know that she has sought to kind of, placate their relationships. We know that she didn't carry as much of the resentment that Maya does, but also, it wasn't her brother who was asking her to be friends. So, I know that we'll probably talk about her more in other episodes, but, yeah, I hope we'll get to revisit her and get to actually dig into her more.
Yeah. And with that, is there anything that we're missing? Anything left we have to say?
It. I really had fun talking about these characters, and I hope that we find more opportunities to talk about them. I know as we talk about found family versus blood family in the future, we'll get to talk more about the parks, and I really look forward to that. But having just like the opportunity to just sit down and talk about characters like Soushi and Maya and Min-Hyuk, just like about them and not so much like, their role in Shin-ae's life. Even though we kind of did that, but I really like that. I think Kimchi has done a fantastic job of creating side characters who do feel like they have actual lives.
Yes.
Sometimes people write side characters where it's like you feel like they exist only for the purpose of a main character. But we get that sense that Maya and Rika are people outside of Shin-ae's life. We get, Dita is, he's one of those who feels a little more iffy, but that's just because, he's a person who doesn't really have much of a life beyond Noel and Soushi right now. But we also get that sense that he might be going in that direction. And that's exciting to see.
He kind of is currently consciously revolving his life around them, but he definitely has his own life outside of them. And that's the thing with Kimchi. All of her characters feel so very lived in.
And I think that's the benefit of having a story that so intimately inside and out. Like I Love You is a story that Kimchi has, she's carried for years, and she's developed and redeveloped to the point that she knows the story she's telling. So it's so easy to develop them better and to give them that livelihood. Hi wrote. I wrote this up. Oh, were you? I'll let you read it then.
Okay. Pawning it off on me. That's so funny. We were both like, we need
Has to.
Yeah, she said, I've always thought that there's a lot of realism to how the main versus side characters are written. It's clear that everyone are developed people, it just depends on their position in their story. I think that's the case in real life too. Everyone's complex, but we see varying degrees of each person's story.
Yeah, I like that. And it's true. And again, it goes back to how we talk a lot about if you look at the story through somebody else's point of view, like how does the story look if they're the main character? What do these other characters look like from their point of view? And I think that's such a good way to explore I Love You and to really grasp a lot of the depth and the nuance that Kimchi is trying to convey. There's so much that we are meant to see through these lenses that, we're supposed to, we're obviously shown characters through a certain lens, but then we're meant to see them through another lens, in retrospect, as we go back and reread, as we learn new information, as we, discover things and go back and go, oh my God, this now makes sense. Oh my God, this stands out to me now. I can't praise Kimchi's writing enough. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But as somebody who just loves character-driven stories, full of details, full of nuance, things that are, a story that is very, show, not tell, it is so delicious to me. Delicious.
It's, like I said before, it's so very lived in. And I think with that, we are good to end this episode. And we will see you all next time for the Cry Fest.
Bring tissues.
Anyone who can guess what we might be talking about, continuing on this character deep dives.
There will be feelings.
There will be tears.
There will be agony.
Bring your tissues.
There will be desperation. There will be desolation. I don't drink, but if I did, that would be the episode for it. Like, ooh boy. It's gonna be a good one. Trust me. You don't even need me on wine to get me crying. So, like, honestly, like, the cry count for this episode was 2. Like, yeah.
All right.
We're just.
Thanks for joining us for this one, and we will see you all in the next one.